Om Asato Ma Sadagamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityoramamritam Gamaya Aviramaedhi Rudrayate Dakshinamukam Tenamam Pahi Nityam. Om, lead us from the unreal to the real. Lead us from darkness unto light. Lead us from death to immortality. Reach us through and through ourself, and evermore protect us from ignorance by thy sweet, compassionate face. Let us sit quietly a few moments and meditate on the Supreme Spirit in any way we please. Om Bhadram Karnevi Shrunuyama Devaha Bhadram Pasye Makshabhirya Jatraha Sthirairangaye Stushuvagam Sastanuvihi Vyasema Devahitayadayuhu. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May we hear with our ears what is auspicious. May we see with our eyes what is auspicious. May we enjoy with strong limbs and bodies the life allotted to us. Om. Peace, peace, peace be unto us all. The discussion today is spiritual qualities, a further installment, and the emphasis is on same-sidedness. Now, why should there be this emphasis on same-sidedness? What is meant by that? And I'm going to submit you to a large number of scriptural references. You'll be overwhelmed with different scriptural references, but that won't convince anybody unless they have a certain basic understanding of what it is that is being driven at. What is it that religion is trying to teach us? So people can stand on high platforms and make all sorts of statements and predictions and recitations, and this will go, we will understand it, and then as soon as we leave, we're busy with other things and we're not particularly concerned anymore with what was discussed there, because it doesn't seem immediate, it doesn't seem relevant. But the point of spiritual traditions is that it is the spiritual thing that is the most relevant thing in our lives. Everything else we seem to consider as being far more important, far more crucial, far more central to our needs and purposes and desires here in this life. But until that spiritual question is solved, none of the other questions are really going to be solved. It may be alleviated for a time. You may feel, yes, you've understood something, you've determined something, you've started on a program, you have done this and that, and you feel you're headed somewhere. And that is true. But it's like being headed on somewhere on a huge ocean. You're in the middle of the ocean, and you can be going full speed and making great progress, but it's not at all clear that the direction you've chosen is the one that's going to lead you to where you want to go. So the first thing that we have to determine is, what is the goal? Where do we want to go? Then we can set our compass and we can head in that direction. And I think what we can start with, I'll give you a good dousing, a lot of scriptural passages to try to overwhelm your understanding, and you'll be terribly, thoroughly convinced, hopefully, of the points that are being made here, or not. Anyway, I think the best place to start is a very powerful and interesting event in the life of Swami Vivekananda. It was at the very end of his life. He had just returned from a triumphal tour of the West, of England, the United States, France, Switzerland, so many places he had gone. His major work, of course, was in the United States and in England to a certain extent. He had just returned from that. And then he received a huge reception when he landed in India. People had been following his progress from the Parliament of Religions onward, and they were enormously enthusiastic when he came back to India. And he really put the whole country, lifted up the whole country. There's a series of lectures that's published called Lectures from Colombo to Almora. And in that, his message to India after his return is laid out in detail. He was a world phenomenon. I mean, when he came back to India, tens of thousands of people met him in, receptions at various committees in Chennai and Calcutta and other places. All along the route from his return to India, he was this celebrated hero. Thousands of people came to welcome him back. They were so impressed by his work in the West and by how he had upheld and shown the significance of the ancient teachings of India. Then he came, after he had founded the various centers in the West, he founded the Ramakrishna Mission and established the work in India, all that he did, but then he was worn out from that, and his brother disciple suggested he should come back to the United States for recuperating his health. And he did that. Then, again, this time he mainly taught in California, in Los Angeles, from something like December to February, in San Francisco from February to end of May or June, beginning of June. And then he returned to India again. So he was, you could say, double, twice he had conquered and achieved great following and great devotion, great support for his work. And then he came back to India. And just very shortly before he passed away, an incident happened which really is the central message of Vedanta. And it's not anything that he got out, he stood on a platform and gave us a lecture or anything that might have come from some public utterance of some sort. It was a very revealing incident and very simple. He was sitting in the courtyard of Belur Math in front of the monastery quarters itself. if you've been at Belur Math, you'll understand there is this very large temple which was built, dedicated in 1938. It was designed by Swamiji in general, and then specifically by Swami Vedananda, another disciple of Sri Ramakrishna. And then near that temple, back of that temple, between the temple and the main monastery building, there's a courtyard. And that courtyard has become a very holy place because Swamiji used to sit in that courtyard and radiate his tremendous spiritual realizations. Now, in that courtyard, there is a tree. It's I forget exactly what kind of a tree it is, but anyway, there's a tree under which he used to sit. And of course, as time goes on, the tree decayed and it started to disintegrate. Pieces began to fall. So people were so attached to the fact that this was the place where Swami Vivekananda used to sit and radiate his spiritual realizations, just, shining and luminous, that they felt that that tree should be preserved. So now that tree has a brick platform that holds up one of the branches, and like that. In a way, you say, well, this is silly, why do that? But that tree is significant of that exalted state that Swami Vivekananda had at that time. And the reason I'm going through all this, you may wonder why bother with all these insignificant details about a tree and a brick platform that holds its branches up. But what's so great about that? What's so great about that is that Swami Vivekananda sat under that tree, as he very frequently used to do. But on one particular day, he said something and radiated something which is the very essence of Vedanta, the very core of our message. And it was like this. Swamiji was sitting there, as was his custom, in the fresh air between the buildings in the courtyard with the monastery on one side. Of course, the temple had not yet been built, although Swami Vivekananda designed that temple, but it was not actually built, designed the basic outline of it, but it was not actually built until, and dedicated in 1938. But so this seat in the courtyard was considered so significant that it has been preserved. Now, what happened on that particular day? Swamiji was sitting there, and there were a few people around. Swami Premananda, one of the other disciples of Sri Ramakrishna, was the worshipper in the shrine, in the monastery shrine, and he was just coming up from the Ganga, from the Ganges, with Ganges water that is used in the worship. Swami Vivekananda suddenly looked at him and looked around, and he said to everyone, "Where will you go to seek for Brahman? Where will you go to seek for Brahman? Here is the veritable Brahman, as solid, as real, as significant as a fruit in the palm of your hand." And what happened is the people who heard that were transfixed. They were actually lifted into that realm in which they saw the reality of what Swami Vivekananda himself saw, but he made it so vivid and so exquisite, so significant, so delightful, that everyone was actually transported, temporarily anyway, transported to that realm in which they saw the truth of it. Where will you go to seek for God? Will you go into a temple? Will you go here? Will you go there? All right, fine, you go here and there. But where is God? The point is, where is God not? And that reality was perceived at that time, on that day, by the people who attended, who were just happened to be in the courtyard at that time. Swami Premananda, who was a knower of Brahman himself, one of the outstanding disciples of Sri Ramakrishna, he was totally transfixed in the perfect realization of the truth of what Swami Vivekananda was exclaiming. Where will you go to seek Brahman? If Brahman is not here, is not right here and now, where are you going to go to find that? And here and now means everywhere and at all time. So that is the message of Vedanta, you see. And because of that, Swamiji further went on to say, shame on those who, giving up the visible Brahman, go after something else. This is the basic message of what the scriptures are trying to tell us, of what the great souls who experience this are trying to tell us. They put it in this way and that way to draw our attention, to draw our interest, and to lead us gradually into it. But someone of the stature of Swami Vivekananda could make actually the people who heard him on that day actually realized that. They actually saw it to be true. And after some time, apparently at that time there was total silence, total absorption. And after some time like this, Swami Vivekananda looked at Swami Premananda, who had been transfixed, going up to the shrine to do his worship. He said to him, all right, now go do your worship. So that is the basic message. So here is the visible Brahman. Shame on those who, giving up the visible Brahman, go after something else. Now, in order to go after something else, after all, we do have to spend an hour here. So that can't be the end of the lecture. So now we go into the various details of what the knowers of Brahman have said, of what the scriptures have said, the things that... but all of these things that we're going to talk about are ways of leading us into that. But we are so... we're so constituted that it takes repeated iterations of this in many different ways to, first of all, intellectually convince us, and then to get us started on the practice of actually experiencing this. So, we shall start. Actually, the Bhagavad-Gita, well, there are two things. We'll start. The first statement is from the Upanishads, as it should be. The Upanishads are the source of everything. But the Bhagavad-Gita is called an Upanishad. At the end of every chapter, it is described as, in this Bhagavad-Gita, who is a discourse between Sri Krishna and his disciple Arjuna. In this Upanishad, it is described as an Upanishad. So it has that status. But the Upanishads themselves are really what is meant by Vedanta. Vedanta is the end of the Vedas, the Anta, the end of the Vedas, which means the significance of the Vedas, the aim of the Vedas. And also it describes, Vedanta also means the sayings inscribed in the end of the Vedas, in the Upanishads, which form the concluding portions of the Vedas. So the first statement, it's remarkable how clear all of this is. And yet, it takes a long time to work one's way into it. But the first verse of the oldest of the Upanishads, which is the Isha Upanishad, the first verse says, Isha vasyam idam sarvam, yat kincha jagatyam jagat. Isha, that means by the Lord, by divinity, by spirituality, however you want to describe it. Vasyam is to be covered, is to be clothed. Idam sarvam, all of this. All of this should be covered with the Lord. In other words, every perception, every physical perception, intellectual perception, every thought should be seen as being permeated by divinity. Every moment of our life should be seen as being pervaded by God. Just that statement itself is, a sufficient prescription. Isha vasyam idam sarvam, all of this should be covered by that divinity, by God, by the Lord. Yat kincha jagatyam jagat, whatever kincha, whatever jagatyam, in this world, jagat moves. Whatever moves in this world should be seen as being pervaded by divinity. Tena tyaktena bhunjita. Bhunjita, enjoy. Bhuj is the root, enjoy. Tena tyaktena, by this renunciation, what are you renouncing? You're renouncing the seeing of multiplicity. You're renouncing the seeing of diverse things, of one thing and another, of causes and effects, of all the dualities of our life. See, all of that is pervaded by divinity, and renounce multiplicity. Now, what we do normally in our lives is we renounce divinity and adhere to multiplicity. That's in effect what we're doing. We have to turn that around. And why should you renounce multiplicity, the seeing of many things? Why should we renounce the seeing of many things? Because that is really only the surface of the ocean. And the surface of the ocean is very stormy. I don't know if any of you have ever really been in the ocean, but I have seen on a ship in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean waves that are essentially as high as the bridge of the ship. I mean, waves that could be 50, 60 feet high or more, crashing over into the on the ships. This is the surface of the ocean is like that. can be like that. Enormous disturbances are there. This is our regular life. This is how we are. At certain points, we get moments of peace and calm and tranquility, and everything is fine. But at other moments, suddenly the whole thing can erupt. But no matter how high these waves are, they don't mean anything in the ocean. A wave that's 100 foot high in the ocean is in places thousands of feet deep. I don't know, I may be exaggerating, but I heard something like 30,000 feet deep, that the ocean is deeper than Mount Everest is high. Anyway, what's a 100-foot wave in a 30,000 foot depth of ocean? You hardly even see it. It is nothing. But if you simply look at the wave, you think, oh, this is absolutely horrendous, and it may be horrendous for you because you're identified with whatever is on the surface. But if you stand back and look at it from a broad perspective, it's a little disturbance. It's nothing much. Why? Because you're seeing a reality which is more significant. The reality is more significant than the disturbance. So our life is like that, basically. And it's all right, because this is how we live at this level, and at this level there are certain things that are extremely significant and extremely momentous and of great concern and have to be attended to with great urgency. All of that is there. But in the background, we should have the idea that this is a phenomenon. This is something that is happening. But the basic message of Vedanta is the phenomenon is what you're really affected by. But the reality is not the phenomenon. The reality is that which is, it used to be called the noumenon, which is the essence, the central core of the reality, not the manifestation. The manifestation can be stormy and of great worry and significance. But if you forget that it is only a manifestation, if you forget what it is that's being manifested, that which is manifested is not affected by any disturbance whatsoever. The reality is that whatever we perceive is a surface perception, a perception to our senses and to our mind. But there is the message, the basic message of Vedanta is Isavasyam. Really, all of this has to be understood as being filled or pervaded by the unchangeable. That there is, at the heart of every changeable reality, there is a truth which is unchanging, which cannot change, a truth which never was created. And because it never was created, there is no way of destroying it. The only thing you can destroy is that which has been created. That which moves, you can stop from moving. But the space in which it moves, there's no way you can affect that space in any sense whatsoever. And the space is what is permanent. That which is within it is only temporary. Then you might say, well, space is nothing. How are you going to feel space? It has no content. There's no joy there. There's no sorrow. Joy, sorrow, good, bad. There's nothing there. It's just a matrix in which things are happening. So how can that be the goal of life? The point is that is the essence. It is the perception of the unchanging which puts into perspective everything that is changing. Isha Vasyam, all of this has to be seen as pervaded by that which is unchanging, which is immovable. Everything that moves, everything that is manifested, everything that changes is seen, is perceived only because of the unchanging framework within which we can make that determination. If there are two trains at a station and you are in one train, you're looking at another train, and suddenly the trains start moving. One of the trains start moving, or maybe both start moving, but you begin to see a displacement there. Which train is it that is moving? You cannot tell, because trains have this characteristic that when they start, it's such a gentle thing, you really don't know whether you're moving or not, or whether this other train is moving. Which train is moving is effectively impossible to determine. It's only if you see the station, you see the station move, then you say, okay, there's movement. That means it's only when you see the unchangeable that you can tell there's any change at all, that there's any movement at all. The reason we perceive this world is because God exists. Otherwise, we would not perceive anything. Or we would perceive things, but we couldn't understand the meaning. Like these two trains. You see that there's a relative displacement, but you don't know whether you're the one who's moving, your train is moving, or that train is moving. But only when you see the immovable, you see the station, then you understand whether it is you who are moving or the other train. So because of the presence of God, because of the presence of the unchanging, we can understand change. We can get joy from change, we can get suffering from change, because of the presence of the unchangeable. If there were, science would be totally impossible if there were no coordinate system. You could not describe any scientific situation or any, say, even heavenly situation or, astronomical situation. You could not describe anything unless there were a coordinate system in which you could describe what it is that you're seeing. This world exists only because there is within us a coordinate system that enables us to notice, yes, this is here, that is there, this is good for me, this is bad for me, I want this, I do not want that. All of these determinations we make only because there's something within us which is unchanging, which enables us to see the external changes. So because of the existence of God, we are able to perceive this world. This is the, these are the profound little things that are floating around that generally we don't pay too much attention to, but they are the ones that give significance to everything that we say and everything that we discuss. Okay, so that is one, that is only one statement. Isha Vasyamidam Sarvam. All of this is pervaded by God. Should be seen as being pervaded by the Lord. So, Tena Tyaktena Bhunjita, enjoy by understanding this, by that renunciation, by that detachment from your self-understanding of what you think is happening and actually experience the reality of that unchanging. That is how you can understand. By experiencing the unchanging, we're able because we experience the unchanging, we're able to understand that which changes. Now, since I promised that I would essentially shower a lot of scriptural quotations on you, I have to at least follow with some of this. And continuing just with the Upanishads, the Katha Upanishad has another statement which is indicative of all this. Yadeveha tadamutra, yadamutra tadanviha. So that which eva indeed iha here, that which is indeed is here, that is also there. And what is there is also what is here. Mrityu samrityum apnoti, mrityoho, from death. From death, saha, mrityum, to death, reaches, apnoti, reaches death. He goes from death to death. Who is it that goes from death to death? Well, all of us go from death to death, as we understand, according to the theory of reincarnation. We are born, we grow, we live, eventually pass away, and then rebirth is there. This is one of the ideas that's definitely emphasized, especially in the Bhagavad-Gita. So we go from death to death, from one life to another. Who is it who does that? Iha, who, iha means here, nana, multiplicity, iva, as it were, pashyati, sees. Who is it who has to go through this cycle of lives again and again? The one who, as it were, sees multiplicity. Iva, as it were. In other words, the Upanishad is saying that really multiplicity does not exist. Everything is pervaded by the divine, everything is absorbed in that divine reality. There is no multiplicity here. But if you see multiplicity, if you think there is multiplicity, then you have to go after it again and again and again. So this is, he goes from one life to another, who, as it were, sees multiplicity. That is, who thinks he sees multiplicity. He sees many things here. Actually, God alone exists. That is what Swami Vedananda was saying in that when he was sitting in that courtyard. Where will you go seek for Brahman? Where will you go seek for that reality? Here is the visible Brahman. Shame on those who set their minds to other things. Then the Katha Upanishad goes on to say, Manasai Vedam Aptavyam, Manasa, by the mind, Manas, by the mind, Manasa Vedam Aptavyam. This Aptavyam is to be attained, future passive participle, if any grammatical buffs are in the audience. Manasai Vedam Aptavyam, this is to be attained by the mind. What is to be attained by the mind? Neha na nasti kinchana. Neha, here, not here, iha. Not here. In other words, here there is no multiplicity whatsoever. It is God alone that exists. So what are all these different things that I see? If I'm not seeing multiplicity, what is it that I'm seeing? You're seeing divinity alone. And we interpret it as being a person or a thing, a building, a reality of some sort. Actually, it is filled with divinity. There is nothing but God. That is the statement that is made. And that is what is our homework. That is what we have to try to establish. That he goes from death to death, who, as it were, sees this. So how often do we have to go through this cycle of reincarnation? How long do we have to do that? As long as we see this multiplicity. When we no longer see it, then we see that divinity alone, and that itself, we become absorbed in that. That multiplicity no longer is apparent. Now, in the Bhagavad-Gita, this is mentioned in many places. For instance, chapter 6, verse 29. Sarvabhutastam atmanam. That means the Atman, the inner self, the inner reality, present in all beings. He who sees that inner reality present in all beings, and Sarva Bhutani Chatmani, who sees all beings in the self, who sees Brahman, the reality in all beings, and who sees all beings in that reality. Yoga Yuktatma Sarvatra Samadarshanaha. He is, having been absorbed in the in the truth of yoga, in the truth of that reality, he sees all beings as residing in the self and the self in all beings. He sees that divine reality in all beings and all beings resting in the self. The man of spiritual insight established in same-sightedness sees the self residing in all beings, sees that divinity residing in all beings, and sees all beings as residing in that divinity. Sri Krishna goes on to say, he who sees me in all beings and all beings in me, to him I am never lost, nor he to me. Established in the unity of all existence, a yogi who serves me, that is Sri Krishna, the divine reality, present in all beings, verily abides in me, whatever be his mode of life. O Arjuna, that yogi is the best who, out of a sense of identity with others, on account of the perception of the same Atman, the same divinity in all, feels their joy in suffering as his own. So this is all the virtues that we try to cover, that we try to attain, that we try to achieve. That seeing of that sameness, it does not mean that we no longer see the suffering as of others. That is one of the profound results of this. You think if I see that sameness everywhere, so a person suffering or happy or suffering would look the same to me. It is the Atman alone. What is meant by suffering, and my heart is hardened toward that. No, there's no significance here. But that's not the case at all. When you see the Atman in all beings, Sri Krishna emphasizes seeing that reality in all beings means that their suffering becomes your own compassion, enables your own compassion to mitigate their suffering. It isn't that you see, oh, how can the infinite suffer, and so your mind, your senses, your attention becomes hard-hearted. Not at all. You become more devoted. It becomes a worship. Because seeing the presence of divinity everywhere, it becomes a worship to respond to that divinity in any way that it manifests. If it manifests as a person in suffering, that the response to that suffering automatically wells up within. One of the profound verses in the Bhagavad-Gita, which is supposed to be in some view, it's supposed to be it's called the Charama Shloka, the final shloka, final verse of instruction in the Gita. Sarvadharman parityajya mamekam sharanam raja. So that means mam ekam, me alone. Me means the divine principle. Sri Krishna identifying himself with the reality that is within us all. In that, identifying itself, seeking refuge in that divinity, that is the highest dharma, that is the highest spiritual practice that we can absorb. Sarvadharman parityaja. Seek refuge in me, mam ekam sharanam raja. And what is the result of this? Aham tva sarvapapebhyo mokshayishyami. I mokshayishyami. I will cause you to be freed. Mukti is freedom. I will cause you to be free, the causative form of the verb. I will cause you to be freed, sarvapapebhyo, from all sins, from all deficiencies, from all lack. Ma shutshaha. Do not worry. Do not be concerned. So the refuge in the Lord means refuge in that infinite principle and that infinite reality which is at the heart of every appearance. That is the basic principle of Vedanta, that whatever changes is underpinned or is an appearance of the unchangeable, that the unchangeable is the reality that is present in everything that changes. So seeing the unchanging is having a grasp on the infinite and the eternal, having a grasp on God. And where do you see that the unchanging? Everywhere, in everything that changes, everything that appears, everything that is dealt with. What we do, our problem is that we see only the finite, we see only the surface. Our whole life, our whole action is a surface phenomenon. We deal only with the surface. But the message of Vedanta, and in fact the message, of course, of all religions is, they put it in different ways, but that everything that appears on a reality which is unchanging. If God did not exist, one would not be able to see anything. The fact that we perceive anything, even anything that changes, is because there is an unchanging substratum, an unchanging reality. Like that image of the two trains. When you see the station, then you can understand the motion of the trains. If God were not there, we would not be able to see multiplicity at all. So we ignore that fact. We say, okay, this multiplicity is real, and we deal with it in every way we can, and that's all right. This is how we run the practical aspect of our life. But if we forget that The only reason we can see the multiplicity is because of the presence of the one, the presence of the substratum. It is because the screen is there, we can see the movie. If the screen were not there, the movie could not be seen. You could have a projector projecting a wonderful movie off into empty space. Nobody would see anything. Of course, then you'll say, well, there are three-dimensional structures that people talk about when they project movies, but that is stretching the analogy. The analogy is that it is the screen, that which is unmoving, that enables us to see all motion. If God did not exist, we would not be able to perceive anything. That is the statement that is made. Anyhow, this discussion can go on and on and on, but the point that is being made in all of these scriptures is that the fact that we don't see God, the fact that we have to infer God, the fact that we have to imagine, yes, there must be such a being, that is a very temporary situation. And as we grow, as we become convinced of it, we can see within ourselves that there is that unchanging. That is the idea of meditation. Meditation is trying to perceive the unchanging within ourselves. Meditation is trying to perceive the existence of God. That is meditation. Everything else you do is something that works toward that tries to achieve that. That is it. If you perceive, if you stop, the point is you sit there quietly and you concentrate your mind, you deliberately do certain things. What you're basically doing is stopping the changes. When you stop the changes as much as you can, that which is unchanging comes into a bolder relief. And it's the unchanging that is what we're aiming at. Once we are identified with the unchanging, then the world phenomenon, we can really enjoy the world phenomenon because we know it cannot kill us. Whatever happens here cannot do us any harm. We can only, serve the purposes that we have in our life. The subject for next Sunday is Evolution of Advaita Part 3. This talk will be given by Swami Tattva-Mayananda. On Sunday evenings, Swami Tattva-Mayananda holds an online class at 6 p.m. on Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. The Zoom and YouTube links are available on our website's homepage as well as in the monthly email bulletin. On Wednesday evenings, we have Vespers with meditation at 7:30 p.m. in this auditorium. On Friday evenings, Swami Tattva-Mayananda holds a scripture class at the Old Temple at 7:30 p.m. Please use the auditorium entrance on Filbert Street. The current text for study is the Bhagavad-Gita. The class is also streamed on YouTube and Facebook. This coming Tuesday evening, March 1st, we will celebrate Shivaratri, the night dedicated to Lord Shiva, at 7:30 p.m. The program will include worship, chanting, meditation, and refreshments to take out. We hope that you will be able to attend. At present, the bookshop and library remain closed and childcare is not available during lectures. Your cooperation in being fully vaccinated, wearing a mask, and maintaining 6 feet of distance is greatly appreciated. If you would like to make an offering, a collection plate will be available on the cart at the door as you exit. There is also a mounted offering box near the auditorium door in the foyer. You and your friends are cordially invited to attend all our services. Om Jyo Shanti Antariksham Shanti Prithivi Shanti Apo Shanti Roshadaya Shanti Vanaspataya Shanti Vishwe Deva Shanti Brahma Shanti Sarvam Shanti Shantireva Shanti Sama Shantiredhi Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om. Peace is in heaven. Peace is in the sky, on the earth, and in the waters. The herbs, the plants, and the trees are full of peace. The gods are peaceful. Everything in the universe is pervaded by peace. May that infinite, universal peace enter our soul and being. Om, peace, peace, peace be unto us all.